10 years ago, I lost Doutson's full brother, Wouter, when his stomach ruptured at the very tender age of 7. This is an all too common cause of death in the Friesian horse, and if I knew back then what I know now, his life may very well have been saved. On the very same day that Wouter died, my 5-year-old mare Ysbrand showed the very first signs of aortopulmonary fistulation, which is another common cause of death in the Friesian, but sadly not a condition that can be predicted or even avoided. I produced a video at the time that went on to help many other Friesian owners be able to identify some of the very subtle warning signs. We all learn from experiences in life, and if what I share in this next video goes towards helping just one Friesian in the future, then I think it's time well spent. I would also encourage every Friesian owner who wants to understand more about the science behind the health issues affecting the breed to take a look at the Fenway Foundation, because they do an enormous amount of research into all the different conditions that the breed are affected with. 2 weeks before Wouter died, he had what was classed as a mild case of spasmodic colic. Before this, I'd not seen any obvious signs of a problem. There's not one particular cause of this type of colic. It can often happen when there's been a change in a horse's routine or a change in their diet, but Wouter's routine had been really consistent. At the time, I was very focused on training him for dressage, as he qualified for the British Dressage Young Horse Finals 2 years running. So he lived much of his life in the stable, particularly over the winter months, and was training on a regular basis, as that's what I thought at the time was the right thing to do, based on what others in the equine world were doing with their own horses. He had a lot of routine in his life, so it wasn't clear what changes might have prompted it at the time. Now, I called the vet who gave him Buscopan, which is a commonly used antispasmodic medication, to relieve the symptoms, and within 24 hours he was back to his usual happy, chirpy self, and at the time we thought that we'd just got him through a bit of a tummy ache, and we really didn't think much more about it. The day before he died, he was out in our turnout pen in the morning, full of beans, leaping and jumping around, and evidently full of life. But the following morning, I went out to feed him his breakfast. He was stood huddled up at the back of his box, clearly distressed, and he couldn't even move. So getting him to the equine hospital down in Liverpool really wasn't easy, but it needed to be done, and when they opened him up, they found that his stomach had ruptured in a place where food had become impacted around a mass of ulcers. Now, there is a connective tissue problem within the breed that can cause weaknesses in the stomach wall and in other areas of the body. But if we can take action to avoid unnecessary strain in this area, we may save a few more lives. It can't always be avoided, but maybe there are a few occasions where it can be. I vowed after Wouter's death that I would never try and wrap a horse in cotton wool again, simply because that's what I'd been led to believe I needed to do if I wanted to train a horse for competition. I wanted my horses to lead as natural a life as possible, with as much freedom in the fields, eating as nature intended, and having variety in their working lives, rather than just schooling day in, day out. 2 years after I lost Wouter, his sister Doutson had a mild case of colic, and I didn't think twice. She was straight up to the vets for a scope, which at the time showed a mild stomach impaction and ulcers. We flushed her with Pepsi to break down the impaction And this in itself was a surprise to me. I didn't know this could be done. We treated the ulcers, and since that day we've managed her with this in mind. She lives out as much as possible. Her hard feed is specifically aimed at horses prone to ulcers, and we always soak it really well and give her an additional digestive aid. On top of this, I try and keep her as active as possible and moving, as I know that this helps her digestive system to keep flushing everything through. And touch wood, we've not had a problem since. Although not officially diagnosed at the time, it's highly likely that Wouter had gastroparesis, which is delayed gastric emptying, which is possibly what Doutzen has, which is why I consider it vital to keep that system moving. This brings me on to the following video, which is all about Ysbrand, known by us all as Iceman. He's Iceman not just because it relates to his name, but also because he's such a super cool dude who we know is incredibly stoic and gives very few signs of discomfort or irritation, which is quite a common trait in the Friesians. Now, Jodie works with this fabulous young man who's very similar to Doutzen in so many ways. He's never been particularly forward in his work, and I know that this is something that Jodie's been working on, just as I had to for many years with Doutzen. Whilst Jodie was off lambing for a few weeks, I stepped in to work with Iceman, and having not worked with him for some time, it struck me that he felt very switched off and more lethargic than usual. And I know that Jodie's done so much work to try and help him become more supple and let go through his body, but despite this, he didn't seem to be finding his work any easier. Our physio Jenny has been to see him a couple of times, but there wasn't anything definitive that we could put our finger on to know what further investigations we needed to take. As he was getting rather tubby, we popped a muzzle on him to help reduce his food intake, in the hope that carrying a few less pounds would perhaps help him. He did lose some weight, but then last Saturday, during our open day, he gave us a reason to dig deeper, as whatever was bothering him became more evident. The following video shows you the process we went through to establish what the problem was. From when Rachel Tennant, who was the vet on call over the weekend, arrived at the farm to assess what exactly was going on. Well, prior to this, Ice had been looking quite uncomfortable. He'd started pulling the Fleeman's posture, which is where he curls his lip. He was pawing the ground and getting up and down. All very clear signs of colic. When we put him in the stable, he was looking at his tummy, and at one point he was completely crashed out on the floor and his eyes went really dull. So these, again, were all very clear signs of him being in distress. The video starts from when Rachel arrives, and he's actually sat up in bed now, and Jodie is there to help him get up. This shows you the process that we went through.
Oh, good boy.
That's it.
Worth it.
Well done, Vincent.
Well done. So what's he been eating in the last couple of hours? Has he been showing any interest?
He hasn't eaten.
He hasn't eaten since he brought him out of the turnout. Yes, we won't really be eating much in the last 2 hours.
And just that one dropping, was the dropping quite hard?
It's out on the road. Yeah, it wasn't. It's just normal, really. It wasn't.
Good.
And you did one in the turnout, didn't you, before that?
How heavy is he? 650?
It's got to be about 650,
Yeah.
so. Buscan.
Buscan, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're going to start with and see how he goes. Right, so good lads. Good boy. Let's all go down and see what you can play. Good lads. And you're with this down. So has he been actively trying to roll or just sort of going down and going, ooh?
He's gone over a couple of times, but not
Okay.
like thrashing around rolling.
Okay.
So he's
Yeah.
just sort of gone down and crashed out.
So not
But he's not.
himself.
He's not a very animated horse anyway.
Right, okay, it's quite stoic.
Yeah, far too stoic for his own good.
Okay. And how old is he? How long have you guys had him?
He's 9. He's been here 2 years.
Right, okay. And no history of colic while you've had him?
No. No.
Can we see your neck?
But he's very similar in lots of ways to Doutzen, who has had gastric impaction.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, that's obviously my first worry.
In wrap your mind, yeah. Oh, who's brave? Who's brave? What a superstar. What a superstar. So his heart rate's okay, his heart rate's only 44, so
Okay.
that's grand. Guts are okay to quiet, and his membranes aren't worrying me at all currently. Good boy, oh. Good boy, oh. Good lads. Well done, my lovely. Well done, my lovely.
I mean, obviously, this is going to make him a little bit more comfortable
Yes.
for a while.
Yes.
And I would rather have him scoped sooner rather than later, even if he returns to normal and he's absolutely fine.
Yeah, in terms of if he's absolutely fine and settles back down, we can definitely do it
On Monday. Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Good boy. Well done, lovely boy.
So how many hours would you give it that this would probably work for?
So, the butte will last him sort of a good 12 hours and the Buscan lasts about 8.
Yeah.
So it'll take him through into the night before he gets in there. So if it's a spasmodic touch wood, usually they start eating, they settle down and just goes back to normal.
In which case we'd go ahead with a scope
Yeah,
on Monday.
Yeah.
But if he goes downhill, then
Yes,
obviously we'd go
absolutely.
straight to
Yeah.
Liverpool.
Yeah, pretty much. So if we're not controlling his pain with those, so if he goes back to showing any colic behaviours, then we'd assume that he's still capable despite that. So we'd assume that it's something other than spasmodic gas.
Yeah.
And then at that point,
But there's nothing at the moment that would.
down. No, I'm just going to do a couple of other things. I'm just going to do a little quick belly tap to see whether we can see anything there, and I will I'll rectal him as well.
Okay.
But there's nothing quite.
Sorry, just to say as well, James saw OB double barrel on the side.
He did double barrel this side.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, help.
He did.
No, not the best.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I didn't really want to interrupt, but I
No,
yeah,
no, but that's.
yeah, I know.
It's,
I think he shot off across the thing. I heard it. It was a big double. I know Obi's not got shoes on, luckily, but
right.
he did double barrel his side. Not sure which side now.
Yeah, no problem. Good boy. So there's nothing on that tap, so that's fine. That's all right.
That's good.
Good boy. Well, you should be.
Yeah.
Right, can we take him a little wander outside?
Just Jodie, just see if he'll stop and pick at any of it. What's your instinct telling you?
That's not quite the immediate, oh, I feel a lot better than Buscan response. So I think we probably will sedate him and put a hand in and stomach tube him as well, and just see that there's not any stomach reflux there. usually within 5 or 10 minutes I like them to be troughing it like they haven't been dead in a week. Sometimes if they, you know, if they go back to almost normal, I prefer to leave them unsedated so that they can keep eating for the next. It's not that we don't have to keep the hay out, but if they're
So
just a little bit
if you chew this
unconvincing.
stomach, that's just to see whether anything's coming back.
Yeah, to see whether anything's coming back. Potentially we might put a little bit of electrolyte in there to be on the safe side if we can get down into it. Good boy.
Can we not put a load of coke in there just in case there's a bit of an impaction?
Well, tempting. Good boy.
I mean, in all
it's very-
seriousness, would that be worth if you're going to tube them anyway?
Yeah, if we're going to have it down there, I suppose it might be sensible to be on the safe side. Have you got plenty more?
We could go and get something.
Yes, I mean, given his predispositions,
Because it's not going to do any harm, but that way, if there is a little bit of
yes,
infection there,
exactly.
then
It might
it's-
start to loosen things up a little.
But then that's not going to help anything.
No. So that would only be useful from the stomach point of view. It wouldn't be more the surgical gut issue.
But you'd like to think, because you've told some droppings, that maybe.
I would hope that there isn't anything like that. Although sometimes the droppings can come through into the colon, and you know they can be sat there from earlier, as it were.
Okay, well, shall I see if we can get hold of some
Yes,
coke?
yeah.
How many litres?
A litre probably to start with.
It's today that Iceman's going to be going off for his scope. I always feel very guilty when this has to happen because he's had no food from 10 o'clock last night and he can't have anything throughout the day. But this is a really important thing because for the camera to be able to see into the stomach and see what's happening all around the edges, whether there's any impaction there or whether there's any ulcers, it must be free of food. So poor Iceman is quite agitated this morning because he won't understand why he's not getting any food. We've arrived. He's travelled really well. He hasn't got sweaty, so that's always a good thing. And look, he's got his mummy with him now. He'll be much happier. But I bet you he tries and drags you to the grass.
Probably. It does seem pretty happy in itself.
He does, yeah. It's nice to see him looking bright-eyed, isn't it?
It's not what I want to see because I
No,
don't
I
want
don't see that either. Device.
Yep.
There we go. That's better. So it's just going down the esophagus there, and there in the esophagus, inflates it a bit. It's got gastric ulcers. The image is upside down at the moment, but this is the border between that's glandular stomach and that's non-glandular, and we're in the normally it's the other way up. It's just the way the scope's in. No, it's all right. It's okay. I'll get it cleaned up in a minute because there's quite a lot of froth on there, but there's ulceration.
But it's knowing what's caused the ulcers, isn't it?
Yeah, you probably never find that out. It used to be, go back 15 years, and you'd say the classic thing was racehorses had a lot of concentrates under a lot of stress. The more and more we see, just racehorses and high stress horses are prone to it. But I've seen little fat show jumpers, which are jumping badly in your scope, and they've got really, really advanced ulceration, and they put them on treatment, and the symptoms completely resolve. The more roughage they get, and the more turnout they get, and the less stress they're under.
Because he's been out 24/7 pretty much since he's been with us.
Right. It's going to be sore. Just come back a little bit, Jenny.
So that's going to explain an awful lot about why he's not going to want to work, isn't it?
Oh, it'll explain why he's grumpy
Yeah.
and feeling just generally cheesed off with life. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very much so. Well, there might be something else, but this would definitely fit with it. 100%. Yeah.
Because I remember with Wouter, when he had that impaction, it was all impacted around the ulcers. But when you said that ulcers alone wouldn't cause colic,
Well, as I say, they can. It tends to be more sort of chronic rather than an acute episode, but it is definitely not impossible. Given, yeah. I have to say I wasn't expecting it to be quite as bad as this.
can you tell from looking at them how long they could have been there?
The short answer to that is not accurately. The slightly longer answer is it looks like they're not particularly recent because the stomach lining in place looks quite thickened. It
Okay.
probably takes a bit of time to form. And
Okay.
so definitely not in the last couple of weeks anyway, I would say. But
Right.
it's impossible to say for sure, but
Yeah.
it doesn't look like something that's particularly recent.
Okay.
But definitely worth treating. And yeah, I mean, I would very much fit with his
Behaviour.
demeanour and behaviour, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just thinking about what's caused them.
Come on, you can do it, boy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate question. Having said that, there's quite a few horses you treat and management doesn't actually change that much. As long as the management is okay in the first place, in terms of having plenty of roughage, not having lots of different mixed groups of horses, that sort of thing, so minimising stress, and the ulcers resolve and don't come back.
Okay.
And so there isn't necessarily a trigger factor you can go, in Ysbrand's case, this caused it, which I know isn't very satisfactory.
No,
but
but
there's often, you often just say, well, let's treat them
and see what happens.
And
Yeah.
they don't come back.
Yeah, because he doesn't get a lot of concentrates. I mean, he literally gets balancer and chaff,
Absolutely.
and he's out 24/7.
Yeah, yeah.
So unless the stress of winter just got to him,
You don't know, do you?
No.
no.
It was so horrific.
Yeah.
for them.
I mean, the last one that I had with ulcers was Doutzen.
The drugs are metrazole,
Yeah.
and I'll have to look which brand we've got at the moment.
Right. And that's a course of 2
well,
weeks,
it's
10
more than a
doses.
month. It used to be a month for full dose. Now I'd probably say 2 weeks for full dose because they're pretty severe, and then 2 weeks of half a dose and see how they get on.
And then scope him again at the end.
Yeah, ideally. I mean, if you find that he's completely changed his demeanour, it's not essential to scope him again, but it's useful to just sort of see whether they've completely cleared up or not.
So, where there's the sort of brown in
that's
the middle
the
there,
food.
there's a bit of food stuck in there.
That's just food, and this is hair and stuff. So, but this is, you can see that line there. That should be really clear demarcation between the glandular stomach and the non-glandular. That should be almost sort of white and pink, and you can see it's very poorly defined. And all this pinkness here, that shouldn't be there at all. And again here, this should be a really clear, well-defined line, and it's really not. Ideally, if you can give it to him first thing in the morning, half an hour before you feed him.
Okay. So my best to keep him in then rather than have him out at grass.
I mean, 24-hour access to forage is really what he wants. It's a toss-up between giving them a half hour of an empty stomach for the medication to work against minimising his stress by having him out in the field. I'd probably say just turn him out and feed him.
So Jodie's got his first GastroGuard. So she'll put it right to the back of his jaw. Squirt it in. Keep his head up so that he doesn't spit it out. And hopefully that'll start working straight away. Annie wants one now as well. She's like, that's not fair. You got something and I didn't. Does it smell nice? No. Do you want an apple after that?
In halves, because I know Bear has a he can't chew them.
He struggles, yeah.
As well, to be honest.
Oh. But he says it's got paste on it now. Teddy's late to the party, as usual. So as you saw, Iceman got home safely and he went straight back out into the field again. Now, I suspect that the dry hay that he ate on Saturday did help aggravate the ulcers, because grass is nice and soft and more palatable, and hay can be a little bit abrasive, especially when there's some irritation present. And it's one of the reasons why we make haylage rather than hay, because it retains a lot more moisture in it. I do remain a little bit baffled, as he doesn't have a stressful life. He lives out 24/7 and doesn't get a lot of concentrate feed. So, of course, I'm going to question why he would have the ulcers in the first place. But we do know that the breed is prone to gastric impaction and rupture, and many of the clinical signs are similar to those shown for ulcers. But at this stage, I'm comfortable with the fact that we've been able to identify what's going on in his stomach right now. The course of treatment is going to help settle these, but it may be that he does have gastroparesis too. And I think we'll know more about that once he's completed the treatment. I am relieved that even after a period of fasting, there wasn't any sign of food remaining in his stomach, which hopefully indicates that he's not suffering with delayed gastric emptying. It could have been a whole lot worse, because if there had been food impacted around the ulcers, it could well have caused rupture like Wouter. We'll make small changes to his management. We'll pop him on the digestive supplement that Doutzen gets, and obviously check him again in a month's time and keep you all posted. As always, a huge thank you for all your support in helping us to give these horses the very best life that we can. And with your help, we'll continue to share their lives and what they're teaching us, in the hope that it can also help others and help other Friesian horses in the future. Paul's just been listening to the last part I've put on the video, and you've just got a little message you wanted to add in, didn't you?
So, as you may or may not know, me and Anne are doing our run round Derwentwater this Sunday. So it's a sponsored run, and obviously all the funds that we do raise will be coming right back into here. But due to the recent vet events with Ice and Hida, we thought that it'd be a really good idea for everything we do raise to go towards covering those. So far we've raised £900, which isn't bad at all. But as many of you know, vet's bills are not cheap. And we're probably looking at in the region of about £2,000 roughly for Ice and Hida's vet costs. So everything we do raise this Sunday will be going towards that. So if anyone would like to help, that would be absolutely excellent. Just head over to our GoFundMe and make your donations there. Thank you.